Hi, it's Katrina. How common was magic in the ancient world? What knowledge did people once have? I'll try and answer these questions and many more in today's video. Ancient people somehow knew that there was more to life than just the physical world. But how? Let's get into it. Building the pyramids with sound. What if the ancient Egyptians didn't use slaves or ramps and pulleys or hydraulic systems to build the pyramids? What if instead they used sound? It sounds crazy, I know, but there is a theory that they might have used sound waves to move huge blocks as if by magic. So, could it be true? And what would that even look like? Well, let's start with what we know about sound levitation. Scientists today can use sound to float tiny objects like particles or droplets by creating strong sound waves that trap them in an acoustic bubble. This is done by arranging plates to vibrate at certain frequencies, producing a force field of sound. However, while researchers can levitate small objects, they haven't yet figured out how to lift heavy materials, let alone giant blocks like the ones the pyramids are made out of. Some recent experiments have taken things a step further, though. In 2016, scientists in the UK and Brazil managed to lift a 2-inch polystyrene ball using sound waves. This was a big breakthrough because the ball was larger than the wavelength of sound lifting it. The next year, scientists at the University of Bristol levitated a ball that measured 0.8 inches or 2 centimeters. If they keep advancing at this rate, who knows? Maybe one day we'll be lifting heavier things with sound. This method would be sort of similar to how an ant can lift 10 to 50 times its body weight. It doesn't quite make sense unless you're a scientist, but it would make things a whole lot easier. So where does ancient Egypt come into all this? A 10th century Arab historian named al-Masudi had an interesting story about how the Egyptians built the pyramids. According to him, the Egyptians used a magic papyrus with symbols under each stone, then struck the stone with a metal rod to make it float. As bizarre as that sounds, some researchers believe it could hint at a type of ancient sound technology. Al-Masudi even described how the stone would move along a path lined with metal poles, possibly to create the sound vibrations needed for levitation. It sounds wild, but al-Masudi wasn't the only one telling these types of tales. Now, while there is no solid evidence that the Egyptians used sound to build the pyramids, there is something strange about the Great Pyramid itself: its acoustics. Did you know that the pyramid can amplify sound at certain frequencies? This means the builders must have had a deep understanding of how sound worked. But did they know enough to harness it for moving stones? It's possible, but until it's proven, it's just a theory. Are there any more modern examples of using acoustic levitation as a building technique? Yes, there are. Between 1923 and 1951, a man named Edward Leedskalnin constructed what is known as the Coral Castle in Florida, all by himself. Huge stones were used in its construction, but Leedskalnin never used heavy machinery. He built the entire castle with no one around to see how he did it. Some people wonder if he had some secret knowledge. He never revealed his secrets, but he did apparently talk about tuning into the music of the stars, whatever that means. Could he have stumbled upon some ancient technique to lift heavy stones, possibly using sound? What do you think? Unfortunately, we are left with more questions than answers, as usual. Did the Egyptians have some lost technology, and did Leedskalnin rediscover it? Nobody can say for sure. Science hasn't confirmed if sound levitation could actually build something like the pyramids, but the possibility keeps the mystery alive. The lost documents of the ancient world. What if the greatest minds of antiquity had their ideas preserved and not burned? Imagine what the world would be like if ancient libraries, like the Library of Alexandria, were never destroyed. History might look completely different if these treasure troves of knowledge hadn't vanished in the flames. Throughout history, countless libraries held massive collections of scrolls and books filled with knowledge on everything from science to philosophy. But one by one, they were demolished. Take Athens, for example. In the 6th century BC, A huge collection of papyrus scrolls was lost, and the same fate awaited the famous Library of Pergamon in Asia Minor, which housed 200,000 volumes. It's hard to imagine all the wisdom within these libraries. Everything was lost, but it gets worse. The real tragedy was the burning of the Library of Alexandria in Egypt during Julius Caesar's campaign. Alexandria's library wasn't just a place for books. It was a university with over 14,000 students studying subjects like medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. This place had it all: a chemical lab, an observatory, a botanical garden, and even an anatomical theater for dissections. And we're talking about ancient times. But when the library burned, about 700,000 scrolls were lost forever. That is 700,000 chances to understand our ancestors' way of thinking, their technology, and their understanding of the universe. In the blink of an eye, everything was simply erased. What could we have learned from these lost scrolls? It's hard to say, but for example, Heron of Alexandria, an engineer, invented a steam engine that worked on the principles of both turbines and jet propulsion. If his work hadn't burned, we might have had steam-powered chariots in ancient Egypt. Picture it. History with ancient steam engines much earlier, it would have been a whole different world. We'd be probably way more advanced by now. Heron even invented an early odometer, a device that could measure distance traveled by a vehicle. So who knows what other genius inventions might be buried in the ashes. The destruction wasn't just limited to Egypt and Greece. In 213 BC, China's Emperor Qin Shi Huang ordered countless books to be burned, erasing centuries of knowledge. Later, in 8th century Constantinople, 300,000 books went up in flames. And during the Middle Ages, the Inquisition destroyed untold numbers of manuscripts, wiping away cultural heritage and scientific advancements alike. And there were no backups back then. Because of these tragic losses, historians today have to rely on fragments and random artifacts to piece together ancient history. But what if we still had those lost books? It's almost painful to think about. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Thomas O'Day for this super thanks. Thank you so much, it really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Assyrian Nimrud Lens. When do you think the first telescope was invented? Go ahead, you can pause the video and take a guess down in the comments, or maybe you already know. Modern history will tell you that it was in 1608 that the first telescope was patented. But what if that's wrong? What if the telescope was actually invented thousands of years before? 3,000 years to be exact. The Nimrud lens, also called the layered lens, is a 3,000-year-old piece of rock crystal that has puzzled archaeologists, astronomers, and historians since it was discovered in 1850. Sir John Layard unearthed this unusual artifact while excavating an ancient Assyrian palace at Nimrud in modern-day Iraq. So what's so strange about it? This piece of crystal, which is carved into a shape similar to a modern lens, has led some researchers to believe it may have been used as the world's oldest telescope. But is that really possible? The lens is made from rock crystal and dates back to between 750 and 710 BC. It's roughly oval in shape with a focal length of about 4.7 inches. This would make it similar to a low-powered magnifying glass, which is able to magnify things up to 3 times. That might not sound like much, but for the ancient Assyrians, it could have been a big deal. I mean, imagine trying to craft tiny inscriptions on clay tablets or precious seals by hand. A lens like this might have helped them see those tiny details more clearly. Some experts think this lens could have been used for precisely that purpose, helping artisans create intricate, delicate designs. Others argue that the lens might have been used as a burning glass, a tool that concentrates sunlight to start fires. The ancient Greeks and Romans reportedly had similar tools, which they described in their writings. But the British Museum, which currently holds the lens, says it may have been purely decorative, possibly part of furniture. They claim it's too roughly made to have been useful for magnifying or focusing light accurately. However, the most interesting theory comes from an Italian scientist named Giovanni Pettinato. He believed the lens could have been part of an ancient telescope. According to him, this might explain how the Assyrians knew so much about astronomy. For example, they described Saturn as a god surrounded by a ring of serpents, which many believe could be their interpretation of Saturn's rings. Pettinato argued that such knowledge would be nearly impossible without a telescope. But critics say that serpents were common symbols in Assyrian mythology, so this could just be a coincidence. Well, here's where the mystery deepens. Other ancient lenses, even older than the Nimrud lens, have been found in Egypt and Greece. Historians generally believe the telescope wasn't invented until the 1600s. But Pettinato's theory suggests that ancient civilizations may have been experimenting with optics far earlier than we thought. And it would make sense, right? I mean, ancient people were obsessed with the stars. The Picatrix. In a time when the stars were believed to dictate human destiny, a singular text emerged, promising to bend the cosmos to one's will. The Picatrix, a medieval grimoire, offers a glimpse into a world where magic and science intertwined, and the line between reality and the supernatural is blurred. The Picatrix is like an ancient how-to guide for wizards and astrologers, filled with strange spells and mysterious recipes. Written around the 10th or 11th century, this Arabic book, originally titled Gayat al-Hakim, meaning the aim of the sage, was later translated into Latin as the Picatrix. For centuries, it fascinated scholars, alchemists, and rulers with its wild concoctions and cosmic knowledge. Imagine stumbling upon a book that claims to unlock the secrets of the stars and allow anyone to control their fate. This is what readers of the Picatrix experienced. Divided into 4 main books, each section dives into a different magical art. These sections include the influence of stars on Earth, the mysterious powers of planets, summoning spirits, and creating magical objects. It's like a crash course in ancient celestial magic. It covers everything from the science behind the stars to how to mix certain herbs and minerals to communicate with otherworldly beings. Now let's talk about those recipes because they are not for the faint of heart. The Picatrix doesn't just use herbs or incense. Its recipes call for things like blood, brain matter, and powerful drugs like hashish and opium. One infamous spell for causing enmity and discord requires mixing pig blood, donkey brains, and other grisly ingredients. Would anyone actually try this? It's hard to say, but these concoctions were supposedly powerful enough to alter a person's consciousness, or even cause an out-of-body experience. The Picatrix was also highly focused on astrology, or the belief that the stars could influence the future. The book describes how to harness the power of the planets to make things happen here on Earth, like spells for love, wealth, health, and even farming success. This strange blend of astrology, magic, and sometimes questionable ingredients intrigued medieval scholars who translated it into various languages. One researcher even hypothesized that the Picatrix was an early influence on the scientific method. It might have inspired a system of hypothesizing, experimenting, and drawing conclusions, although this interpretation is hotly debated. The Wizard of the North. Did people of the past live in a time when magic and science blended into one? Maybe not everyone, but Michael Scott certainly did. And no, I'm not referring to the boss from The Office. Michael Scott, nicknamed Scotland's first scientist, the White Wizard, and even the Wizard of the North, made his mark in the 13th century. He was a mathematician, astrologer, philosopher, and alchemist. People even believed he could peer into the future, cast spells, and communicate with spirits. But who exactly was this mysterious figure? And what did he really do? Michael Scott was born in 1175 in Dumfries, Scotland, into a well-connected family. After gaining a basic education, he traveled through Europe to study at major learning centers like Oxford, Durham, and even Paris. He wasn't an average student by any means. He was curious and driven, exploring subjects from mathematics and theology to astrology and alchemy. And like many who pushed the boundaries, he eventually drifted from regular academics into what people at the time would call the occult. You can think of Scott as a mix between Leonardo da Vinci and Merlin. Not only did he study the stars, he translated works from Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and Arabic, bringing lost knowledge back to the Western world. One of his notable accomplishments was translating works by Aristotle, which helped spark the intellectual fire of the Renaissance centuries later. Scott's reputation grew, and he began moving in powerful circles. Eventually, he caught the eye of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, who invited him to court in Sicily. Now, Frederick II's court was a medieval Hogwarts of sorts, filled with mystics, alchemists, and astrologers from around the world. Scott fit right in. There, he began experimenting with a combination of science, magic, and psychology, what some called psychomagic. He worked with theories of astrology, the power of suggestion, and a knowledge of human nature. He essentially became a medieval magician who could predict your reactions and influence your thoughts just by observing your expressions and body language. One of Scott's most famous magic tricks was done at Emperor Frederick's request. Frederick asked him to measure the distance between a church tower and the heavens. But after Scott calculated the answer, the emperor secretly removed a few inches from the tower and asked Scott to measure again. Scott, realizing what Frederick had done, cleverly remarked that either heaven had moved or the tower had shrunk. He impressed Frederick so much that he became the emperor's official astrologer. Scott's rise in fame and power also stirred up trouble. The Catholic Church was not too happy and was wary of anything that strayed too far from established beliefs. They excommunicated Frederick twice and accused him, and by association Scott, of heresy. The church painted Scott as a dark wizard who consorted with unholy forces. To survive these accusations, he had to be careful, so he became a master of public relations, often presenting his magic as harmless or even charitable acts of foresight and healing. Scott's reputation as a wizard grew, especially through tales about his supposed powers. People claimed he could control the weather, turn witches to stone, and even lock away the plague in secret vaults. He also became associated with the Fibonacci sequence, the famous number pattern found throughout nature. Scott mentored the mathematician Leonardo Fibonacci, who wrote a book introducing Europe to this mathematical sequence. Even though we might not think of numbers as magical, the Fibonacci sequence's appearance in everything from flower petals to galaxies has given it an almost mystical reputation. As he grew older, Scott began predicting his own death. He said he would die when a stone fell on his head, and even calculated its weight. To prevent this, he wore an iron helmet for protection. But ironically, he took it off during a church service one day, and a stone really did fall on him, just as he had predicted. Whether or not the story is true, it sure adds to the mystery surrounding his life and seemingly supernatural abilities. Secrets of the Unseen Realms. Ancient Egypt is well known for its monumental temples, pharaohs, and gods. But did you know that magic was at the very heart of daily life in Egypt? Egyptians didn't just live in a physical world, they believed in hidden, powerful forces, both divine and dangerous, that shaped every moment of life and death. Magic, called Heka, wasn't a silly superstition to them. It was a real force, as real as gravity is to us today. Heka could even become a person or a divine being. Magic wasn't just for people seeking love potions or protection from harm. It was a tool even the pharaohs used to guide the whole kingdom. The god Heka is often seen in Egyptian art, especially in temple carvings, sometimes even helping the sun god Ra sail his sunboat across the heavens. For the Egyptians, Heka was a gift to humanity, a divine power allowing them to protect themselves from evil forces lurking in the unseen world. But things got complicated under King Akhenaten, who ruled Egypt with a radical new approach. He declared that only one god, Aten, the sun god, should be revered, abandoning the worship of all the other gods. This religious upheaval left people confused, especially since for centuries they had relied on a whole pantheon of gods and magical rituals for protection. This was so bad it led to civil war. Did Akhenaten's ban on all but one god mean they had to abandon Heka as well? It's a mystery, but it's likely that many Egyptians held on to their magical practices in secret, even if publicly they worshipped Aten. Scholars are fascinated by how the Egyptians used magic and religion together. For example, while we might separate religion as something sacred and magic as something mysterious or even forbidden, ancient Egyptians saw them as two sides of the same coin. Priests performed magical rituals in grand temples, while villagers used everyday magic in their homes. Imagine if the same person who led Sunday services also sold protective charms to ward off evil spirits. According to Egyptologists like Dr. Emily Teeter, religion and magic were inseparable in Egyptian culture. Magic could heal, bring good fortune, and offer hope when life got tough. Magic was essentially seen as a private religion. But magic wasn't always practiced publicly. Village magicians worked quietly, passing down spells by word of mouth, since only about 1% of Egyptians could read and write. We have temple walls with spells carved into stone, but most personal spells and magical objects, like protective masks and figurines, were likely passed down in secret. Amazing illusions. Imagine stepping into an ancient temple, its shadows dancing with eerie light. A worshipper ignites a fire, and a nearby statue springs to life, lifting a cup as if to offer a divine drink. Doors creak open, revealing a colossal deity bathed in twilight. What sorcery is this? Ancient magic? No, just ingenious engineering. One of the masterminds behind these magical machines was Hero of Alexandria, a Greek engineer and inventor who lived between 10 and 70 AD. Hero described these devices in a book called Pneumatics, revealing that most of the magic was actually early science at work. For example, Hero created a moving statue trick by using air pressure and water. Here's how it worked. A statue stood on a pedestal with a hidden tube running from the altar to the statue's cup. When the fire was lit, it heated the air, causing it to expand and push water up through the tube. This water would then flow into the statue's cup, making it look like the statue was pouring a drink. How clever is that? Another amazing invention made temple doors open on their own. This mechanism was similar but involved water and pulleys. When air expanded from the altar's heat, it forced water into a bucket, making it heavier. The heavy bucket acted as a counterweight, pulling on cords connected to the doors, which would swing open. Today, this would be like an ancient version of automatic doors at a grocery store, just with way more mystery. The average person didn't know how this worked. Temples also had statues that appeared to speak. But how? Priests could enter hidden compartments in these statues, making it seem like the god was delivering messages directly. This may remind you of the Wizard of Oz, where the wizard uses special effects to seem powerful and mystical, when really he's just a regular guy behind the curtain. In temples, the priests acted as the hidden wizards, creating experiences that left visitors in shock. But it wasn't just Hero's inventions making temples feel otherworldly. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder and Father Athanasius Kircher claimed that some temple lamps, particularly in Egypt, burned with what seemed like an eternal flame. One theory suggests that these so-called eternal lamps were fueled by clever engineering. Ancient reservoirs, possibly hidden underground, supplied oil or bitumen through concealed channels, keeping the lamps burning without anyone seeing how it was done. Hero also described an ancient thunder machine in his book. Imagine opening the doors of an ancient labyrinth and hearing a thunderous sound echoing from within. This effect was created by a simple device. When the door opened, pulleys and cords pushed a sphere into a vessel of water, forcing air out through a trumpet. The result? A booming sound, as if the gods themselves were roaring. So, now you know. In ancient temples, magic was a combination of science, engineering, and a bit of theatrical flair. These ancient inventors weren't just creating illusions, they were giving people an experience they would never forget, all while working behind the scenes like ancient stage magicians. A question of ancient spaceflight. Alright, so here's a weird question. Could Socrates have somehow known what Earth looks like from outer space without actually having been there himself? It sounds crazy, but a passage in Plato's Phaedo has got some people thinking. In this text, Socrates describes Earth as if he's looking at it from above. almost like a picture of Earth from space. He says the Earth is like a colorful ball with vibrant purple, gold, and white patches. To modern ears, that description sounds suspiciously familiar to what we know Earth looks like from orbit. The big mystery is, how could Socrates have possibly known that? Could he have been speaking poetically, or did he somehow know about Earth's appearance from up high? Some enthusiasts believe this might hint that ancient Greeks, or maybe some other ancient civilization, had knowledge of advanced technology, maybe even spaceflight. It's a stretch, but that's part of what makes this idea so fascinating. Let's unpack this mystery. We know that ancient Greek scientists and philosophers were incredibly advanced for their time. Think about Aristarchus of Samos, who suggested that the Earth revolved around the Sun, centuries before Copernicus made the same claim in Europe. Or consider Archytas, who supposedly built a steam-powered flying machine way back then. The Greeks were pushing boundaries in science and technology, so it's easy to see why some might wonder if they could have had knowledge beyond what we usually give them credit for. So, was Socrates hinting at secret space travel knowledge? Or did he maybe have access to some records or lost knowledge from an earlier civilization that could fly? Well, there's another more down-to-earth explanation. By Socrates' time, most Greek scholars believed the Earth was spherical, and philosophers like Philolaus and Pythagoras had argued that the Earth moved. Socrates' description of Earth as a colorful sphere wasn't as out there as it might seem. It was actually part of Greek thought. But what about the vivid colors? Couldn't he only know that if he'd somehow seen Earth from above? Well, not necessarily. The Greeks loved storytelling and often used vibrant imagery to make their ideas come alive. It's also possible that Socrates was simply imagining what Earth might look like from high up. He could have used colors like purple and gold to describe the beauty he thought would exist above our messy, muddy world. Anyone who's climbed a tall mountain or flown in a plane might imagine similar views. Socrates' words could just be a poetic way of imagining the beauty of the unknown. In the end, there is no hard evidence that the ancient Greeks had access to space travel. The Greeks were clever, curious, and imaginative, but it doesn't necessarily mean they were capable of leaving Earth's atmosphere. So, was Socrates in space? Probably not. But hey, it's fun to think about. Magic, the medieval service industry. In medieval England, magic was a business. While people often think of medieval magic as dark spells or eerie potions, it was mostly about practical services, almost like a supernatural help desk for everyday problems. Need to find lost items, heal an illness, or even win the heart of someone? Magic had you covered. For medieval people, magic wasn't a strange, outlawed practice. It was just another option to solve life's mysteries. At the time, magic wasn't yet seen as evil, but as something that fit right into society, with the church mostly ignoring it unless it caused harm. In these times, a group known as cunning folk served as medieval magic providers. Think of them as the town's service magicians or specialists for hire. Whether rich or poor, everyone turned to them. A noble might seek help locating stolen treasure, while a villager might ask for a charm to cure an illness or retrieve lost money. In fact, in 1375, a magician named John Chester claimed that he helped recover 16 pounds for a man, a hefty fee back then. People like Agnes Hancock, another service magician, believed that she could heal people by blessing their clothes or by asking fairies for help. While Agnes was eventually told to stop her spells to avoid punishment, her popularity shows us just how much people relied on magic. The surprising thing, even royalty wasn't above using a little magical assistance. Duke Edmund de Langley, son of King Edward III, reportedly hired a magician to find some stolen silver dishes. Alice Perrers, a mistress of Edward III, was rumored to have used love spells to keep the king's attention. Eleanor Cobham, the Duchess of Gloucester, took it further, supposedly hiring someone to help her conceive. However, things got messy when she was accused of using magic in a plot against King Henry VI. Magic in medieval England wasn't illegal until the mid-1500s. Before that, it was seen as more of a moral slip than a criminal act. If the church intervened, punishments were mild. often limited to fines or public embarrassment. As long as magic wasn't harmful, it was generally ignored. As time went on, things started to change. By the late 15th century, fear of witchcraft, the kind where people were accused of working with demons, started growing in Europe. Laws became stricter, and suddenly, those who had once been respected as cunning folk were now seen with suspicion. But medieval England's fascination with magic never entirely disappeared. Even today, traces of this belief remain, whether in lucky charms or superstitions we still follow. Mayan medicinal knowledge. What if the answers to our modern health problems have been hiding in plain sight? In the fast-paced, stress-filled world we live in, many people are turning to ancient healing methods to find relief from illnesses that modern medicine sometimes struggles to treat. It's pretty clear that people are tired of side effects from pharmaceuticals and want something that feels more natural. But what if some of the wisdom we need to heal has been around for thousands of years? Take the ancient Maya, for example. Around 2600 BC, the Maya developed a system of health and healing that balanced the body, mind, and spirit. They were experts in agriculture, mathematics, and medicine, and many of their secrets to health are still relevant today. So what did they know that we could use? One of their favorite superfoods was chia. Yes, the same stuff in Chia Pets. But these little seeds were much more than just a decoration. The Maya valued them for their energy-boosting powers and often used them as fuel during long journeys or battles. They also used chia for joint pain and to help stimulate saliva production. And fun fact, chia actually means strength in the Maya language. The Maya also understood that health isn't just about physical well-being. They believed in the power of Chu'ulel, or the life force, which is similar to the concept of qi in Chinese medicine. They saw the body, mind, and spirit as a connected system, and if one part was out of balance, it could affect the whole. We are still learning how emotional health impacts physical health today, just like the Maya. But here's something that might surprise you. The Maya were huge fans of chocolate. They didn't just eat it for pleasure, though. They used it as a powerful medicine. The Maya knew that cacao, which is packed with antioxidants and minerals like magnesium and iron, was great for the heart and the brain. They even used it in rituals for birth, marriage, and death. Chocolate was so important to the Maya that they used it to connect with the gods. Think about that the next time you're eating a Hershey bar. The Maya were also early pioneers in sauna therapy. They used sweat baths called temescal to purify the body, relieve muscle pain, and even help women during pregnancy. They would sit in stone buildings where hot rocks were used to create steam. These days, we use saunas for similar benefits, so the Maya were definitely onto something.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The monsters of Hollow Earth. For thousands of years, people have believed in an underground world hiding beneath the surface of our own world. The ancient Greeks believed there was a dark land filled with the souls of the dead. In the 17th century, the leading scientific minds believed there was a mirror world underneath the surface, a world within the hollow of the earth, filled with its own atmosphere, its own creatures, and its own exotic landscapes. They called it the Hollow Earth theory, and many of the most intelligent people on the planet supported it. These days, science tells us a dramatically different story. We know the Earth is made up of crusts, liquid magma, and a hot core of shifting iron and nickel. There is nowhere for an entire world of beasts and lands to exist. It's just not feasible. But in 1692, when the Hollow Earth theory was proposed, it was revolutionary. The first person to officially speculate about a world within the hollow marble we live on was Edmund Halley, the man who Halley's Comet is named after. Edmund suggested that the planet is nothing but a series of spherical shells, all spinning in different directions. He believed the space between each shell was large enough to have its own atmosphere, which could support life. During the years that followed, more scientists speculated on what these hollow Earths might look like. The theory grew and changed until instead of many shells, the Earth was entirely hollow, with one huge cavern underneath miles of rock. Some even believed there to be a small sun hanging in the center of the Earth. This miniature sun supposedly created an environment within the planet even more beautiful than the environment on the outside. The Hollow Earth theory went on for a shocking amount of time, only losing traction in the 20th century when most people agreed it was nonsense. Ancient subterranean war tunnels. In 1948, the small village of Yongqing in China's Hebei province experienced a massive flood. Villagers were running for their lives when suddenly the water was diverted and began to drain away, sparing the people. It was later discovered that the floodwater had been diverted by a mysterious underground passage that nobody knew was even there. Moving forward to 1951, a house in the same town abruptly imploded. It caved in on itself to expose a subterranean cavern. Within the cavern, villagers found dozens of doors leading to dark and creepy passageways. This was a major archaeological discovery. It soon became clear that underneath the village of Yongqing was a series of ancient war passages used centuries ago. These tunnels and caverns were used to shelter troops during times of war. There were military facilities, camouflaged exits, locking gates, and heated brick beds. But most impressive were the miles and miles of tunnels. They had been designed in such a way that an army could flank an invading enemy and attack unsuspectedly from the rear. It's doubtful the full extent of these war passages have been uncovered, even today. They had likely been used by the Song dynasty from between 960 and 1127 AD to defend their territory. They were constantly at war with the minority races to the north, the Khitan and the Jurchens. These secret passages were used like a wall, only underground. Enemies had no hope of moving beyond the underground wall, as the soldiers hiding down in the tunnels would spring up like rats and obliterate any invading force. The carnivorous plant. In the dark and humid jungles of Borneo, Indonesia, a mysterious plant has just been discovered. An international team of scientists identified a new species of pitcher plant called Nepenthes pudica. For those unfamiliar with the pitcher plant, it's a rare carnivorous plant shaped like a water pitcher. It's such an enticing plant that insects can't help but crawl into its mouth, at which point they slip in and get stuck. Then they get dissolved in the plant's digestive juices. The newly discovered pitcher plant is a little different than the others in that it utilizes a unique method for feeding. According to Martin Dankak from the Department of Ecology and the Environment at Pulaski University, the pitcher plant behaves differently from any other known species. It places its traps underground instead of above the surface, hiding its traps in cavities underneath the soil. Instead of waiting for creatures to crawl into its mouth, it grows traps under the ground to snag tiny invertebrates like ants, mites, beetles, and other subterranean critters. The plant does this by growing a short underground stem. It's almost like growing a root, except this root produces leaves and pitchers, all under the soil. The pitcher will then attract the invertebrate, and the insect will get stuck and slowly digested. The tunnels. Underneath Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital in Ontario, Canada, there is a network of dark and creepy tunnels. The psychiatric hospital opened in 1889 just outside Toronto with one goal: to help the mentally ill. It was built as a series of Gothic cottages as an alternative to a prison-like asylum. The patients were encouraged to farm, garden, and even help in the construction and maintenance of the property. It was the patients themselves who played a major role in forming the foundations of the hospital. Unfortunately, a rapidly increasing population destroyed this kind of community work. The patients were pushed into forced labor. The place was filled up way too quickly, violence broke out, and by the 1950s, things were completely out of hand. The hospital kept on running until 1979. Then it was mostly abandoned. People still worked and lived on the grounds, but its days as a mental hospital were finished. The nearby cemetery is all that remains now of those who had called the asylum home. But what's underneath the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital? The tunnels run from each individual building to the next, creating a kind of maze underneath the property. These tunnels were said to be used by the facility to move patients without others seeing. There were also rumors that the hospital became so burdened that unwanted patients were taken down into the tunnels to be burned and disposed of. These rumors have never been proven true. The official story is that the tunnels were simply made so that the staff could move more efficiently from one ward to the next. Would you be brave enough to explore these tunnels? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Billions of organisms. Scientists have just discovered an ecosystem underneath the surface of the planet. The ecosystem is about twice as large as all the oceans in the world combined. It's a rich universe hiding beneath our feet that no one ever knew about. There is no light, extreme heat, and almost no nutrition. Plus, the subterranean world is at the mercy of intense pressure. But even in the face of all these seemingly impossible impediments to life, the underground biosphere is brimming with it. Scientists have estimated there are roughly 23 billion tons of microorganisms, outweighing the combined weight of every person on the planet. This incredible discovery was made with help from researchers at the Deep Carbon Observatory. They claim the diversity of this mysterious underworld is similar to that of the Amazon or the Galapagos. Yet, unlike those environments, this one is pristine because humans have yet to ruin it. It's the hollow earth theory brought to life, but on a microscopic scale. Karen Lloyd from the University of Tennessee said the discovery has been like finding a new reservoir of life. So, what exactly is living underneath our feet? After 10 years of study, including the combined brain power of 1,200 scientists from 52 countries, we have the answer. These great minds say that 70% of the bacteria and archaea on Earth are living beneath the surface. Some organisms live so deep that they haven't seen daylight in millions of years and no longer function using energy from the sun. Some of these creatures have found a way to create their own methane to fuel themselves. It's a whole world of strange microscopic organisms, many of them single-celled, all living up to a mile deep. Underground alien base. Underneath Archuleta Mesa on the border of Colorado and New Mexico, near the small town of Dulce, there is supposedly a secret underground facility. This facility is allegedly operated by both humans and aliens. It's never been proven, but the rumor has been around since at least 1979. That was when businessman Paul Benovitz realized he was intercepting electronic communications just outside Albuquerque. He believed he was picking up some kind of communication from a secret underground base. It's unclear exactly how he came to this conclusion, but he was so convinced that in 1983, his story went national with the popular press. And by 1987, the story was entrenched in the UFO community. Famous UFO conspiracy theorist John Lear even claimed he had independent confirmation of the existence of the base. All these years later, Dulce Base is nothing but a fantasy and a myth. It could be real, but nobody has ever been able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Still, the rumors persist that the United States government is working here in conjunction with extraterrestrials, mostly kidnapping humans and using them as guinea pigs in genetic experiments. Some believe the aliens are working with our own scientists to try and create a new and improved human species. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Secret World War II bunker. There is a secret underground bunker hiding 73 feet beneath the busy streets of London in England. Black rooms, crumbling passageways, and faded warning signs can be found in this lost place. The mostly abandoned network of tunnels was once crawling with the most important people in the British government. During the days of World War II, the bunker was used as a secret hideout from which top leaders planned everything from the Dunkirk evacuation to the landings at D-Day. Britain's famous Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, was locked down here in the cold and damp throughout all of November and December of 1940. That was when the German Blitz was at its height. The Nazis were bombing London mercilessly, and so the Prime Minister had to stay safe underground. While this may sound really uncomfortable, it was surprisingly civilized. Staff was already working and living down in the tunnels like bureaucratic rats. They would surface for air only once every 10 to 14 days. The showers may not have been great, but at least there was good food, crystal dining ware, a fully staffed kitchen, 2 mess halls, and everything else needed to keep the machine working. After the war, the bunker wasn't needed anymore. It was eventually abandoned and these days is only accessible through a booked tour. Dark matter underground. Scientists are currently working a mile underground in hopes of discovering the undiscoverable. Beneath an old gold mine that's no longer in use, inside a giant titanium tank, scientists are on a mission to find dark matter. These bright minds are convinced that dark matter, a completely invisible material, makes up almost the entire mass of the universe. They say it's all around us, that we wouldn't exist without it, and yet they don't technically know what it is. It's one of the greatest mysteries researchers haven't been able to solve. They are hoping to get a little closer to the truth deep underneath the town of Lead in South Dakota. The idea behind this secret underground lab is that a mile of solid rock, a large tank of pure titanium, and a secondary tank will block the cosmic rays coming from space. Hopefully, if the team can block the cosmic rays and cosmic particles, they'll be able to identify dark matter particles. All they really need is a single dark matter particle to slip inside a vat of liquid xenon, which they have hiding inside the innermost tank, and collide with a xenon nucleus. If this happens, a flash of light will go off, and dark matter will finally be confirmed. This search has been a long time coming. Scientists only recently announced that after 5 years and $60 million, they have finally gotten to work hunting for dark matter. There was a big delay because of COVID, but now everything is moving at full steam. The only issue is that as of right now, this subterranean base hasn't found anything yet. The Monument Lab. One of the most famous landmarks in London is something called the Monument. It's a tribute to the Great Fire of London in September of 1666 that utterly decimated the English capital. The monument is 202 feet tall, a single column with spiral steps running around the inner wall. It looks like any other monument, and it's visited by hundreds of thousands of people a year. But underneath the monument is a secret. The architect, Sir Christopher Wren, wanted to prove once and for all that the Earth orbits the Sun and not the other way around. When the monument was built between 1671 and 1677, the agreed science was still that the Sun revolved around the Earth and that the Earth was at the center of the universe. To pursue his scientific endeavor, Sir Christopher Wren designed the monument to also be a scientific instrument. Underneath the base, a central shaft was carved to be used as a zenith telescope. The whole structure was designed to hold an underground laboratory, accessible only through a small hatch in the floor, which is currently hidden by the modern ticket booth. At first, it was a big success. The underground lab could be used for gravity and pendulum experiments, and for viewing the stars. The issue was that the above-ground traffic caused the whole place to tremble, which very quickly rendered it useless. Underground Research Laboratory. The Underground Research Laboratory in Manitoba, Canada, was an experimental test site for the storage of nuclear waste below the ground. It was operated by Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, built inside a huge granite batholith between 1982 and 83. Scientists stored a large amount of radioactive material inside the research laboratory, then sat back to see what happened. They studied measurements on water exchange, rock movement, and anything else that could theoretically jeopardize the safety of the radioactive materials. The idea was to store all toxic waste deep in the ground so it didn't pollute the environment. Unfortunately, we don't know what else went on at the site or even how the experiments went. We know there were other international users there doing something, and in 2003, the decision was made to shut the lab down. The radioactive waste was supposedly cleaned up, and the underground base was closed. Now the site is supposedly home to only one experiment. International scientists are measuring water leakage through a gigantic clay plug. Thanks for watching! Which of these underground secrets did you find the most fascinating? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon. Bye!